and welcome everyone to our first episode of KorraScope, an interview series where we, the fandom, pose questions submitted by you guys to the creative folks behind the Legend of Korra. We're starting off this project with a real bang by having the opportunity to talk with the insanely talented Jeremy Zuckerman, composer of both Avatars and the Legend of Korra score, who was awesome enough to be our premier guest. Anyway, I'm Andrew from the forum/fan community, AvatarLegends.net. I'm joined today by my two co-hosts.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean from the YouTube web series Korracast.
And I'm Kevel, the writer behind AvatarLegends and Online.com.
All right, so before we get going, we'd just like to take a second and welcome and thank Jeremy for taking the time out of his day to meet with us. This is kind of our pilot episode, so
cool. I'm excited to be the premier guest for this. Very cool.
It was great for you to accept, and so welcome. All right, so I think I'm probably going to give the floor to Sean now. Tell us how this interview is going to work, Sean.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. First off, thanks to everyone, all of our fans and all our communities for submitting some awesome questions. We tried to pick the best ones from each of the communities, and I think you'll be happy with the selection we chose. So the way this is going to work is we're basically just going to go around the horn with each of us just asking questions to Jeremy, who will give some amazingly glorious, insightful, just mind-altering answers. We're all sure.
Pressure's on.
But basically pretty simple. Oh yeah, and one more thing, Jeremy, if you could just phrase all of your responses in an instrumental music form, that would be great.
No problem.
Cool, awesome. All right, so well, that's basically it. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question, and this question's from YouTube user Steve Davis. And he asks, so Jeremy, you've said in other interviews that you compose the music after the animation is more or less kind of complete of an episode, and therefore kind of late in the production of the episode. So what sort of preparations, advanced preparations, can you do beforehand? Things like, do you have access to storyboards, or are you in the writer's room to know season arcs?
There's not a lot of pre-production other than conceptual things, and usually that's much more broad. That's not specific to an episode as much as maybe the story arc. Mm-hmm. Like Mike and Brian, before, like, as we commence a new book, they'll sit down and talk to us, and they'll just sort of very broad strokes talk to us about the mood or any sort of new characters. But the truth is, I'm discovering this stuff as like episode to episode, and I don't know what's happening next, and I can sort of try to guess, but I really don't know that much about the story until I see it. So when I get an episode, I have about 2 weeks with it from the time I get it. But really, I have about probably 4 or 5 days to write, because in those 2 weeks, there's revisions from the previous episode, there's recording the instrumentalists and mixing them, and delivering the previous episode. So there's about 5 days to write. So it's very fast. And the music really just sort of naturally develops thematically over the course of the season, and there's just as it follows the narrative, and just sort of attaches to narrative themes and things like that. But really, there's no real pre-production time or anything like that. It's just sort of jump into it and go.
Wow, well, a lot of crunch days, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's pretty fast.
Do you often feel like the crunch time just kind of settling in from the start?
Do I feel it?
Yeah, like do you feel like it's kind of a short amount of time to get it done? Do you ever feel like you need more time?
I always feel like I need more time. Very rarely am I, just sort of, waltzing to the finish line. It's usually pretty intense. Yeah, it's definitely a grind. It's cool, and actually, it's almost worse though if the schedule gets weird and there's one episode and then we, there's sort of a break between episodes or something. Like that happened a lot in book 2.
Oh yeah.
Problems with the production, not on the post-production side, but more like with animation stuff. Mm-hmm. It was really hard to get into a flow, and it was sort of hard to remember ideas and things like that. But with book 3, it's been really consistent, really fast, and chops wise, your chops get honed a little better that way. It's a little more stressful in some ways, but I think it actually might be a better way to work.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. This question, asked by a reader known as Space Rock Bending, sort of branches off the last question. While we know that music is generally composed after the animation, are there ever any moments of production where the images are influenced by the sound of the music? I guess one specific example would be the Agni Kai track. Was the music based off the fight, or did the artist draw ideas from the style of the music?
Yeah, again, we got the stuff after, so that's nice that that question's asked. I guess that means that the music attached well to what was happening visually. But you know, I'm trying to, the only time where the editing may be influenced by the music is with the trailers.
Okay.
Other than that, like, and that's fun because then the editing is very musical, because it's following the rhythm of the track. And so with with the big trailers, like the big season trailers, I'll give them a track, and then they'll edit to it.
Yeah, I remember in the book 2 trailer, I think you used the forget what track it was. It was either the Brothers track or the
That's right.
Yeah. And I thought that fit very well. So
and that what's cool about that, actually, that was Jeff Adams, the editor, who he had chosen that track, and he did all the editing, and I actually never saw it until it was done.
Oh wow, that's that's gonna be a kind of a reverse cool kind of experience for you.
It was, especially because I didn't have to do any of the work. But yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was really cool because they had chosen a different route. The juxtaposition of the sort of emotional melancholy, sparse with all that action. It was a really cool idea.
Definitely, yeah.
And I feel like maybe the first time I saw it was at Comic-Con.
Was it Comic-Con that? Yeah, you were probably in the room cheering it on as it premiered.
Yeah, down
I
there.
remember when the lights dimmed down and they showed that. Was just so awesome. That was one of the coolest moments.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was really, really, really nice to see, and to hear everyone cheering. It was,
All right. So the next question comes via Facebook. Oh man, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get this name right, so I'm gonna try it the 3 different ways I think it might be. Javar, Havar, or Yavar. So hopefully I got that right. He asks, where do you find the emotion that you put into each track? Do you visualize yourself in the situation, or do you just conjure up a similar feeling to the scene and compose from there?
That's a good question. It sort of depends, but I find myself often trying to experience the scene as if I were an actor, and just sort of believing what's happening, really trying to experience it and create it. And usually when that happens, then ideas happen. Sometimes, inspiration's not there, or the stress is super intense and it's hard to get into that headspace. But the nice thing is at this point, when you get far down the line in a season, you have a lot of thematic material and you have a sort of a musical vocabulary in place. So you kind of know what needs to happen. So it's not like reinventing the wheel every episode. And you're sort of like, oh, well, this theme needs to happen here, but it needs to be a little more like this or something. And, emotionally, it needs to be more subdued, or it needs to be more exciting, or it needs to resolve differently than usual, that kind of thing, But, so it's sort of a combination of just sort of like the craft of it, the technique, just the sort of technical aspects. And then actually, getting into the emotion of the scene. But definitely emotion guides me compositionally when I'm writing new ideas and things like that.
It's cool that you kind of compare it to the acting. I mean, that's something that's not so obvious, wouldn't be something so obvious, but it's a really kind of cool idea. I like that. And how much work do you actually get to interact with the actors that much?
No, I've only met Janet Barney.
Oh yeah.
I met her once briefly. She was really cool, really sweet. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm sort of in my cave. Not very glamorous. And, a lot of it is just being alone and working. And then, we see them for spotting sessions. We see Mike and Brian for the spotting sessions, but that's kind of it, and then I see musicians when I record them.
Yeah.
It's kind of a solitary kind of thing. And there's not a lot of interaction at all, at least with this show, with the actors. And I think with animation in general, there's not a lot of interaction.
Awesome.
Okay, so our next question comes from a blog reader, Link9150. Does each character's attributes and personality inspire you to make different variations of a track? As an example, peaceful music for Aang or intense music for Toph?
Absolutely. I mean, and that kind of happens naturally just by the writing, just sort of paying attention to the writing and the direction. The cool thing about this stuff is sometimes really clever thematic ideas will happen, but I can't really take credit for them, because it's just sort of ingrained, inherent in the script, or in the way the story develops and the way the character development happens. So it's kind of like the better that is, the better the musical ideas are, honestly.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm.
So throughout Avatar: The Last Airbender, now The Legend of Korra, each season seems to have a particular style of music to it. Wyatt, a writer and commenter on my blog, asks, "How do you decide which style of music will be used for each season?"
This sort of relates to the last question in the sense that it's really dictated by what's right for whatever's happening on screen, and it happens very naturally. Like, it doesn't require a ton of thought anymore. I think at this point I know Mike and Brian well. I know the writing style. The writers do a wonderful job of sort of making the ideas clear. And I think as long as I'm doing what's right, it just sort of naturally happens. Stylistically, it seems to be for these books. Each book has had a different sort of tone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a matter of kind of figuring out the musical equivalent of that tone, or music that would support that tone, and just being consistent with it. Like book one seemed to be a little more, have some more light moments, and the Dixieland stuff and the jazz stuff there seemed to be more opportunities for that. And then as we go down the line, it seems less about that aspect of the setting. The story seems to focus less on that and more on the drama. So naturally, it just sort of, it's still there. There's still those moments, but it's a much smaller part of the musical style, the musical language.
Yeah, we can definitely hear that in book two. It really gets into the more theatrical, that big sound.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Although we did hear a lot that in book one, especially towards the finale, all those great tracks.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Exactly. It started to get bigger like that. It was much more intimate in the beginning. Even like the score was more intimate, more subtle, and then it started to get bigger, more grand. And book three is also definitely a different tone than book two, but similar to book two in the sense of it's dramatic like that and a bit bigger musically.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how just the overall writing process has such a huge impact on just the sound of music in the series.
Absolutely, it really completely dictates everything. I mean, you really have to do, the role of a film or TV composer is to always do what's right for the project. No matter, you have to really sort of be careful and keep your ego in check and do what's right.
Yeah.
Because what's right isn't what you want to do, but you have to, or you're not doing your job.
So with these next few questions, we're hoping to shed a little bit of light on some of the difficulties of being a composer. So to start us off, we have a question from AvatarLegends member Spirit, who is wondering, quote, have you ever run into a sort of creative block or had a day where things just weren't adding up as you wanted them to while composing? And if so, how'd you get past that writer's block?
Have I ever had I've had a lot of those days. I have a lot of those days. I think those days are actually a part of my process, unfortunately. And I always think to myself, like, if I could just figure out a way to not have those days, so much faster, it'd be so much more enjoyable. But I mean, I think that's just part of it. Like, there's a lot of, anxiety definitely plays a role in it. Like, because the creative process, it's always a risk. There's always something at stake. There's always like that thought: is this going to be the one that I can't figure out? Is this going to be the one that for some reason I just can't do it?
Yeah.
That thought is there to different degrees throughout the process. Sometimes it's really strong and it's just completely paralyzing, and other times it finally, when I'm acting and I'm really working and it's flowing and I'm not thinking anymore so much about whether it's good or bad. Like, those are the times where that voice goes away and work happens really quickly. But that's usually at the point where I've gotten to the point where I've run out of time. I don't have more time to indulge in that fear, and I just have to act. Out of desperation.
It's interesting, that you say the deadline too. I mean, as much as you kind of hate it, I'm sure it's the biggest motivator, right? And I'm curious how you'd feel like if you didn't have that deadline. Would you feel your work would be as good as you think it could be?
Right. Well, that's the other interesting thing. Like, it's very hard for me to finish something without a deadline, And I've noticed that things I spend a lot of time on aren't necessarily better than things I do very quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes there's details and things that I would like to develop a little more, explore a little more, or just experiment with a little more. And that sort of, it's hard to experiment. You still can do it, and you still have to do it. You still have to find time to experiment. But it's a smaller percentage of the work, the experimentation aspects, and a lot of it is just just getting stuff down.
Yeah.
Get done.
So I'm guessing during the the off season. Well, the off season for you when you're not actually seeing the episodes and composing for particular episodes, do you get to like kind of experiment in your off time between the times you're during those deadline periods? Yeah. Do you have time to like experiment and say, maybe for next season I can try this instrument or something like that?
Right. There's usually a little bit of off time, but like we're doing Kung Fu Panda at the same time last time, and there was an overlap. Kung Fu Panda, I think, went much straight through, and it's seeming like we're going to go straight through into book 4, which is good news for fans, but
yeah,
it can be intense. So there's not a ton of time for experimentation. Also, I usually like that to have that downtime to just sort of chill out for a second, or just work on something completely different musically, like play with my modular synth or
good to kind of escape from that world for a little bit. If you
play some guitar, I definitely then as it starts coming back, usually there's some ideas that start brewing, some instrumentation ideas, or just something that starts hanging out. Usually though those ideas happen as I'm working, and they grow throughout the book, throughout the season. So once I'm in it, there might be a little seed, and I'm not even really aware that it's something promising. It's just a small cue, and then I wind up coming back to it and back to it and back to it, and it starts growing and developing and having variations, and then it becomes like a really significant part of the score. But it's something that I wouldn't have predicted would have been such an important thematic element in the beginning.
I have a similar question from the Facebook page What I Learned at SRU that asks, what was the most challenging piece of music you've worked on for the Avatar series so far? How did you overcome that challenge, and how do you feel about the end result?
Maybe the Nuktuk stuff.
Really?
Yeah, that stuff's crazy. It was because it was supposed to be referencing a style that I had never done, which was this sort of talkie style, the flash forward.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and analyze some of those scores, but I had no time really. I had to spend like a couple of days doing it. And this was during the whole process, the normal 2-week cycle. So, it was time that, you don't really have to do that kind of thing. And then I had to figure out, because stylistically it's so different than the rest of the Korra music. There's technical things like, bringing up new templates and figuring out instrumentation and, and then I really had to just sort of figure out how to write in that really bombastic technical style. And so what I wound up doing was like singing along to this, like recording myself with a microphone along to the scene and watching the scene, like setting up a tempo with a metronome and singing, and then like getting phrases with my voice, just rough ideas, the shape of the phrase, the gesture, or whatever, and then like redoing it until it's right, like singing it until it's right, and went through the scenes that way.
Were you responsible for any of the lyrics, or were those?
No, those were great. Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be cool to get a secret soundtrack of just your tracks of your voice singing the music parts.
I don't know if I'd want that ever to get out. Oh man, but that's what I had to do. I was desperate, and then I just jotted down on pencil and paper like just basic, harmonic and melodic ideas, and then fleshed it out a bit more, and then brought it to the computer and fleshed it out entirely, and then recorded it. But it was a really time-consuming process, and took it took the majority of the time of those episodes as compared to the rest of the music in those episodes. I liked the way it came out. It was fun because it was a challenge, and it was something I never would have done, in my own time. And I'm happy with the way it came out. I think, that's how I am about all my music. I try not to listen to it too hard or think too much about it. It freaks me out.
Because with the Nuktuk, that has really become one of those like signature themes now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that will be needed anytime in the future, considering it's very much Nuktuk, and I don't know if it's going to be.
Right, exactly.
But still.
Yeah, it took all that work, and then it's sort of like, all right. But the theme was written, the melody was written by, I should know. I'm going to have to look up their names. That's the thing. I never work with these people in person.
Oh, yeah.
And Josh, oh God, I can't remember the last names right now. The writers, two writers, they did a great job. They really did a great job just coming up with that melody and the lyrics for the Nuktuk theme, And then I just wrote the accompaniment around it and figured out the harmony and everything that would accompany the melody and all that stuff and orchestration. But that stuff, that was part of the Nuktuk stuff, and then there was all the scoring of the underscore of the Nuktuk movies, and that whole the craziest one was that fight scene where Bolin was fighting in conjunction with the movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That one took a lot of effort.
Oh man, well it was awesome. It turned out like it worked so well. Just the whole
cool
sequence.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was great how they used Bolin's character to kind of mirror Nuktuk. I thought the sound was great on that too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Ben did an awesome job with that. Yeah, it's so funny. Like Bolin, his character really was hilarious with that. Like he was getting really confused. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that you would use that singing technique again in the future to potentially create new scores?
I possibly would. And actually, it did come from. I did use it once before. Another time when I was super desperate, and it was for a completely different kind of thing. It was for a computer music thing for a dance piece, and it was like an extremely abstract piece of music. And I sang all the gestures and then recreated them, with the computer with processing an instrument, and it worked really well, and it was really fast. It was a really fast way of working. But I don't always, obviously like that. I've only done that twice, but I could imagine myself doing that again because it's worked now both times, in times where I've just felt really overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess necessity kind of calls for whatever works. And
that's right. Mother of invention, right?
Yep. And so kind of going off of that, actually, this next question's from Ascot from Facebook, and they ask if you've ever listened to a piece or composition you've done and kind of wished you could go back to it or done it differently. Anything that you kind of like, oh man, I wish I could just change that.
There's definitely a lot of stuff in The Last Airbender that I feel about. Even the Agnikai stuff, but like I know that people responded well to it, so it's great. It is what it is, But I was just learning a lot during that process and figuring out a lot. And there was a lot I didn't know. I was really thrown into the fire with it, which is a great way to learn. But it's weird when you're learning and millions of people are hearing it. It's very revealing and kind of embarrassing. But I guess the emotion got across with those things, and that's what people respond to, and that's what really is important. So I try not to beat myself up too hard about it, or try not to dwell on it too much, And
at a certain level, we're all our own worst critic too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was going to say the great thing about it being a series is that a lot of the time, you do a theme once, and then you can revisit it throughout, different seasons and such. So you might be able to like rectify whatever fixes you want to do.
Exactly. There was even like some callback to, like some finale music from Avatar with the wand stuff, Yeah, and I sort of rearranged the strings a little bit, and I just cleaned a couple things up, fixed a couple things, and it was nice to come back to that and to do that, to have the opportunity to do that. It felt good, and it was cool. It was nice too that it still felt like relevant, I still felt it was a valuable piece of music.
I think just those whole episodes, the fans, just everyone responded to those episodes, and the music was a huge part of that, just to call back to what they love about the world and stuff, and you could really kind of sense that throughout it.
It's cool, yeah. When I'm calling back stuff, it's really fun because I can just feel that connection to the fans, and it's kind of cool because they've been so vocal about this stuff, so awesome about it.
Yeah,
so it's sort of like, this is for you guys. I hope you like it.
I mean, with those whole episodes, those 2 episodes, and we had our emotions were tripwired with the music. Then Iroh came back. It was just like one thing after another, reminding us of the old series.
Yeah,
right.
And like when that track came back on from that, I was like, I know that. Where is that from? I mean, I knew it was from you, but I was like trying to figure out when I first heard it.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's very nostalgic.
Yeah. That's great. Great.
All right. So, as some of you might not know, Jeremy, in addition to being a composer, is actually a crazy good guitarist. I actually remember stumbling across a YouTube video of you recently doing
Cool.
some things with the guitar that I wasn't even quite sure a person could do. Of course, I'm no expert on guitars, but nevertheless, check it out, and we'll probably link that somewhere
Oh, thanks.
in the description. Anyway, Nick via Tumblr was wondering, what are some of the major differences you notice between performing with a band and composing and performing the score for a series like Avatar? What do you enjoy the most about each?
That's a cool question. So with a band, it's very direct. Like musically, when you're performing an instrument, it's immediate. As opposed to composition where you sit and you can spend hours on 10 seconds of music. With a band, it's just happening in real time, and especially with the band that I was in for a long time, which was a funk band. There's a lot of improvisation and stuff. And the structure of the songs. The arrangement would change every time we performed it, and that kind of thing. And that immediacy was great, and also interacting with other people in real time, and getting sort of working off their ideas and feeding off of each other is a great experience, and it's so nice to be sort of to get out of your head a little bit, out of your own space. And then that being said, the flip side is sometimes really great to be the only person making any musical, any of your creative decisions, and to have time and sit with an idea that if you present it to someone in the early part of the idea, they would quickly judge it as being, piece of shit.
Yeah.
But you might have something, and you want to sit with it for a while, and poke at it and play with it until it becomes something useful, because there's something in there that no one else hears yet, because it's not there yet. So that's the composition side of things, and that that's what I really love about composition. I love to use the full brain. Composition is a very full brain activity.
Yeah.
It's like you're using your right brain, for all the creative stuff and the emotional stuff, and then the left brain is all the technical aspects and trying to figure out orchestration and and just all the there's so many different technical aspects in music. So composition could be a really nice non-real time sort of full brain process. I love it about that. But I think I do need both, and sometimes when I'm not getting enough of one or the other, I get a little weird creatively, a little out of balance. Hanging someone for to help me out.
Stuck in your cave, you need to go out and just start busking on the street with your guitar.
Exactly. God, that'd be great.
So our next question, which comes from Macmeal, is a bit more open, so you can answer this in a bunch of different ways. Macmeal asks, what is the process by which you go about creating a track in your studio? Now, you don't have to go into too much detail. You can kind of summarize a little bit.
Okay, let's see. So the process is, well, specifically for TV, it starts with a spotting session where we talk to the showrunners or the creators, the director, about the musical needs. And it's very specific, and we go through with time code. There's like time code is it's just a clock running that attaches to the video so that you can specifically reference points in time in the episode. And so we go through that, and we talk about where music needs to come in, where it should go away, basically the way music is functioning, which is a really big part. And for me, that's more important than talking about the specifics of the music. Like I want to figure the specifics out, but I want to discuss how it's going to function, and I want to discuss the emotion, And from there, I kind of don't like too much when people start giving me very specific musical ideas. Like maybe sometimes it's great, like with, for instance, the track before, it was Brian's idea, and it was the brothers' backstory in book 1.
Oh yeah.
And that was Brian's idea to do an Arhu and cello duet, where the Arhu represented oh god,
one of them.
Tonrak, or who is it? Is it him?
Nuktuk was Aman.
Okay, yeah.
What can I remember his other name right now?
Oh, Tarlok.
Tarlok.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
Tarlok was the Arhu, and Nuktuk was the cello. That was an awesome idea. But usually I prefer to figure that stuff out once I'm in the studio. So we do the spotting session. We get the specifics of where stuff's coming in, how long it's going to be there. Is it going to be just an establishing thing, where it goes away, or is it going to stay the whole scene? Is it going to become what is it attaching to emotionally, narratively, all that stuff? And then I go back and I make a document that's real specific with all that information, and I get into and then I get into the software and I just start poking at it. And I used to work linearly, meaning like starting from the beginning and then going to the end, mainly because of limitations of the software. Like if you start out of order, it throws the rest of the session all out of whack. But now I just use multiple sessions, and I've started working, like choosing the hardest, most musically dense act first, and knocking that out of the way. And that actually is really helping in a lot of ways. It's helping because, like, there might be some thematic elements that are there, and then I can use them throughout the episode and other places, sort of work non-linearly that way. And psychologically, it's really great too, because once you get past the big hump, you feel much different. And that stuff, you can't expect like a super intense third act to take the same amount of time as a really light first act. And I was kind of treating it that way before. Mm-hmm. So I might spend a couple of days on 3 minutes of music, and then like bust out in one day bust out 7 minutes of music. And just the different it just depends on the kind of.
They just need different things. Each piece needs a different.
Exactly. Right. Something might be really dense and really, it might take a lot of time to figure out. It might have a lot of sync points where it hits a lot of specific points. And so you got to figure out musically how to make it sound smooth and right, but still hit all those moments, And then something else might just be little transitions and stuff like that. A little simple underscore.
I imagine that it must be pretty challenging, considering the animation's pretty much all done by the time you get it, to kind of match the tempo of the music to like the tempo of the scene. Because you have to like do those.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what they're called, but when the reveal, you have to do the big reveal with the music, and you had to kind of match it up. Is that ever challenging, kind of getting the tempo right and stuff like that with the scenes?
Yeah, and it's gotten easier somehow. I think I've figured out ways without realizing it too much of how to make it work. And if it's off of like a half a frame or something, you don't really notice. I used to be really specific with that stuff. Like insane tempo maps where like crazy things and all these tempo changes and stuff. And I actually think musically it's better to have less of that stuff and to have more consistent tempos and just be a little looser. And then you can like the way I work now, I might work backwards where I'm working and then I'll realize like, okay, this is the biggest point where something really needs to hit. Those other points aren't as important, so I don't need to favor them as much. But it's off by a little bit. But the entrance wasn't so important. Like there's a bit of a leeway where where the cue can start. So then I'll shift the entrance, the entire cue, so that the really important point is hit perfectly. And almost always that's all you need to do. Like the rest of the stuff is okay. But there might be things like, like ritardando or accelerando where it speeds up or slows down to hit a point. And you sort of have to fit that in musically. And that's really the biggest, I think that to me, that's like what really separates the craft, or what really, the real distinction of film scoring or TV, scoring.
Yeah.
Is making it function properly and also making a good piece of music.
And
that's a tough one.
Because it could be just very like utilitarian, just like, okay, we got that, but it doesn't have the emotion or just the impact on its own as its own separate, score or whatever.
Right. Or the phrasing might be awkward, or, it just might be a little awkward, rhythmically or something. And so, right, exactly. So trying to make all those elements work is definitely the challenge, I think.
It's cool too, just the more you talk about it and just how much it mirrors in so many ways, just writing a script or just a story, really, right? You have the tentpole big moments that you kind of have to bridge to and stuff. And
exactly. And that's the thing, awesome. Like the better that stuff is, and this stuff is all great. And, then like the Korra stuff is great. And that's why it's almost like it has inherent musicality to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like seeing transitions, tension, how long is the tension happening before the release? That kind of stuff. That's dictating what's happening musically, really. So in a sense, if that's wrong, the music's not going to feel right,
For sure.
And if it's right, conversely, if it's right, the music's going to feel right. But the composer can't take 100% credit for that, because the form is really dictated by, the direction and the writers.
All right. Well, just I guess moving on from there. But the next question is actually, bring up something that's very familiar to you, I'm sure. But a question on all of our minds. But anyways, this is from Nancy. She in your recent Reddit AMA, you talked about the difficulties due to the tech and some of the process of converting the Last Airbender official soundtrack album. So we're just curious about some of the details. If you go into some of the details of that process and what those difficulties are, and if that Avatar OST is even still being considered.
They never give us a definitive no.
Okay.
They seemed more excited about it before.
Oh, okay.
It's really what we want to do. We're hoping that they let some third party come in.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd still keep everything, all the rights and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a real win-win for everyone. So that's the hope. So that the biggest hurdle is getting past that stuff, getting the permission to put it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they don't want to say yes is because they don't want to say no. You know what I'm saying? Like they still want to reserve the right to put it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. This is how many years have gone by.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's tough. It's hard, and I think they know it would be a big process, and I think it's always the time is never right for it. But I'm really hoping that at some point they let someone else take control of it. And they'd still keep, and like I said, they'd still keep everything. So I don't see what the drawback would be.
Yeah, that does seem like a very natural, just like, everyone kind of win-win-win in that case.
Right. And then the technical side of it would just be bring back those sessions. It was on a different computer, old computer with like all old software and all that stuff. It can be done, and it would be done. And then I would definitely want to go in and re-record some stuff too, for sure. Still keep everything. I don't want to go too far. Like that's the scary. I don't want to ruin it for everyone's nostalgia. I don't want to spread the nostalgia. But there's some stuff that on its own, like it needs to be revisited.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Kind of going off that too, because you are so just tech savvy, especially kind of in your role and stuff. How do you see just the next couple years? Is technology, you think, going to drastically change your role or kind of the industry in regards to the composition and music? Do you see anything just like maybe it won't? Maybe you see kind of just maintaining as it is.
I think the quality potentially of it sonically will improve, but compositionally, like that's something that technology can't help.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like the artistry of it. Like
yeah, for sure.
Like you can use the technology in really artistic and interesting ways, and that will probably happen. We'll hear all kinds of really cool artistic production ideas. But the composition itself is sort of an age-old thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, same thing they've been doing for centuries, I guess.
Right. But the cool thing is, like, with me, because of the technology, I can record live musicians and make it sound bigger than it really is, and do things that I wouldn't have been able to afford, a few years ago, or 10 years ago, or whatever, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, that definitely, I use the technology to make up for lack of budget and things like that without sort of, piling on MIDI and synth and stuff like that. Just as far as like recording in my, my little studio and dubbing and stuff like that, and having like good, computer that can handle a lot of tracks and, good plugins that sound really good, audio plugins that, good, that make everything sound really super pristine and big, and those will only get better. All those tools will definitely improve, and obviously the computers will be able to handle more and more. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's obviously trends that come and go.
Yeah.
Film scoring trends. I'm sure there'll be other ones based on technology, and you hear all the dubstep trailers I think that's already played out, but.
And it's kind of the old adage: as much as things change, they stay the same, right? It's always going to be about the art and just the composition. So.
Exactly.
Now, in terms of the Avatar OST, was there ever a time, like probably closer to when Avatar Last Airbender ended, was there ever a time where Nickelodeon was very close to greenlighting it, but then kind of pulled the plug last second, or has it always been kind of more of a long shot of getting it?
I think. I mean, there's stuff that I probably shouldn't talk about because I don't want to burn any bridges.
Yeah.
But there was stuff that went on, and I can't figure out a political way to talk about it. It doesn't matter because those people aren't there anymore, and the people that are, that I deal with now are awesome. And they like, Megan Casey, she was like a really big part of getting the Korra soundtrack done, which was a big deal because they had never put out a score soundtrack. That's the only score soundtrack they put out, like songs and stuff like that, licensed music, but they've never put out a score soundtrack. So the Korra was the first and only so far, and that was really hard to get made. And they were really excited about it, and they loved it, and they loved the end result. But I think they expected it to sell much more than it did, and I don't think they were familiar with the market. Like the Korra soundtrack actually sold really well for the market.
Oh yeah,
and it like competed with like blockbuster movies.
Were they surprised by that, or what? When they saw those numbers coming, like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're basically like, to them, it's just I don't know. Like, probably not really worth their time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But because it is like a kind of a labor of love, these soundtracks.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
They have a lot of other stuff going on, so that's why it needs to be a smaller company probably dealing with that stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it seemed like there was some talk around the Korra time that it might happen, and everyone was excited, but that excitement seems to have waned a little bit. But we still haven't given up because we haven't gotten a definitive no. And it could still happen, and I hope it does because I know a lot of people want it. And I feel bad. I get these emails, and I feel really bad, like just being like, sorry, I'm saying the same thing. It sounds like I'm,
Yeah. No.
What are your take on all these petitions online? Like I see petitions for like a Book 2 OST or an Avatar Last Airbender OST. Do you think those could potentially help, or are they just kind of?
They do help. I mean, we brought them to Nickelodeon as part of our case to do the Korra soundtrack, the Book 1 one.
Oh, okay.
And all that stuff helps. Every little thing that alone isn't enough, but it's part of the argument that we make.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It is important, absolutely. And the more signatures, the better on that stuff, for sure. It shows that there is a desire for it.
We'll keep pushing it then.
So next up, we have a question from Jacqueline via Tumblr, who asks, "What does it feel like to hear the score you've created be put together? What's it like watching the completed episode with your music in it?"
I think the most fun part for me is when the musicians come and record. Because before then it's pretty lifeless, and the thing is, like, if you write too much for the computer, you're not really exploiting the performative aspects of the instruments. You know what I mean? Because there's things that the computer can't do that the instrument does. Yeah. And those things are usually like the best part of the instrument. So the computer's really good at like long, slow tones and that just really sort of static kind of ideas, but not much. It's not much use for things beyond that, honestly. I mean, people do it and it sounds okay, but it still sounds fake to me, Yeah. So the what's called a mock-up is before you record the live instruments and you're using the computer, and that's what Brian and Mike hear first, and that's what I get revisions on, and that's usually pretty uninspiring for me to hear. And sometimes it's easy to like lose track, lose sort of perspective, and be like, oh, this is not good, this is not exciting. And amazingly, Brian and Mike never get like that, which is really special. They can see, they have enough trust, and they can see the potential in the mock-up. Sometimes better than I can, which is awesome, because that is rare. Like a lot of times you run into a situation where a director might not be able to, they sort of forget that that's just the mock-up, and they're not can't kind of see the end result, and you know what I mean. But with Mike and Brian, they totally know, and I think it's also because we've worked together for so long,
Yeah, the trust is there. So
the trust is there, and a lot of times they have more faith in me than I do in myself. It's great. But so that there's a mock-up, and it's kind of not that exciting, and then we have the musicians come over, and it just comes to life, and it's so awesome, and it's just the simplest ideas all of a sudden are so much more interesting, and have the emotion all of a sudden is there, and that's really the best part for me. And then I mix it and I send it off, and then when it's all together, often it's great. And every once in a while, actually the mixer, Adrian, is awesome. And sometimes you have these situations with different projects where the mixer is not as into it, and they're not it's not a dynamic mix, and it's really static, and like the music's too quiet the whole time. It's just sort of there, and the parts that are supposed to be really exciting are just sort of sitting underneath. Yeah. But Adrian seems to pay attention to the dynamics of the mix and the scene and the emotion, And that's really important. That's kind of everything in the sense, because that's the last step of the audio process. And if it's not happening there, then that's it, you know. So we're lucky in that sense. That's such a great mixer. And Brian and Mike are at the mixes. We don't go to the mixes. You know, I don't have time, unfortunately. I wish I could, but they're there and they're doing a really good job too. So yeah, it's super gratifying to see it come together, and usually a big relief.
Cool. Well, so the next couple questions are kind of related, and we're gonna kind of ask them at the same time and cheat here. Don't tell anyone. But first one is from Facebook user Sean Ganka, and he asks, "How many instruments have you learned to play because of Legend of Korra and The Last Airbender?" And then the follow-up is from Meryl from Facebook, and she asks, "What's your favorite instrument to work with and why?"
I feel like I know Sean.
Yeah, he works on the show. Yeah. He's a script supervisor, I think.
Yeah, I think I know that guy.
Yeah, yep. He's a buddy of ours. He's met him times at Comic-Con and stuff.
That was a dirty test. How many have I learned? How many do I actually feel comfortable playing?
Yeah, I guess that's the question. What do you consider you knowing?
Yeah, I mean, I took lessons. I took with the pipa, which is a Chinese lute, and the guzheng, which is a Chinese zither. And the pipa was super hard, and I never really felt comfortable with it. So if I want to use pipa, I call my teacher. But I had fun learning it, and it was a really great way to learn about the Chinese, style.
Yeah.
But the guzheng was more comfortable for me, and it's a bit of a simpler instrument, and I use that all the time still. And I've had fun with it, like tuning it weird and playing the wrong side of it and bowing it and doing all kinds of stuff. And it's proven to be like a really important, instrument in the studio. And then there's like things like the duduk and stuff like that, like random wind instruments, like the halusa, the shao, the shun. These are just different Chinese instruments. And the duduk is Armenian. Okay. And so that I can get by on, like, with some editing help. But now really I have the instrumentalist Hong Wang come in, and he plays all the erhu and zhonghu and all the string and wind instruments, all the Chinese stuff, and he's incredible. But the nice thing is that I've learned through him and just through working on the show, about these instruments, so I can write parts for him. For the most part, I'm usually, I get the range right or whatever, and that's a big part of it, because they're a lot more they have a lot more limitations than Western instruments, like as far as the notes, the range, all that stuff. So you kind of have to know about them to write for him. So Han comes in and he'll bring like 10, 15 instruments. He comes every 2 weeks from Las Vegas, and we record a bunch of stuff for the show.
Oh, awesome.
But so I've learned a few, but like really the guzheng is the one. I mean, the guzheng is the one that's stuck out of all of them.
Most familiar with, most comfortable, I guess, with that one.
Yeah.
So to lead in with the next question, I'm going to take a little tangent, and I wanted to mention when Book One's album first came out, and of course I loved it, so I was playing it on loop and stuff. And luckily my family got hooked, so it wasn't too much of a nuisance for them. But anyway, my father was under the impression that you were a Chinese composer. I guess it came in conversation one day. I was like, no, he's actually not. But then I started thinking about how that was kind of interesting, much the same way that people are often surprised to learn that Brian and Mike, are American, considering the show has such a heavy Asian influence. And for instance, Brian, I know that he is very into that Japanese culture. And that kind of makes sense, but I don't remember exactly ever hearing how you're able to present such an authentic sound, considering it's not really the culture that you're used to. So yeah, to completely steal the thunder from the asker of the next question, who is Avatar Legends member Be the Leaf 995, and the question is, what kind of different cultural experiences inspire your music?
Wow, it's funny. Well, I got into it completely out of necessity, to be honest. I got the job, the Last Airbender gig, maybe a year out of CalArts. And at CalArts, there's a strong world music community, a strong world music program. But I didn't study any Chinese instrumentation there. And my partner, Ben Wynn, was more part of the world music stuff. And he actually, like for the early Avatar stuff, a lot of that, like the chanting and stuff, were his ideas, and the idea to use gamelan, that was his as well. so just sort of being exposed to that stuff was through CalArts, but really we didn't know too much about it at all. And it was just through a lot of research, to be honest, and a lot of analysis. And then, like I was saying, I went and started studying with a teacher. Her name is Celia Liu. She's an amazing master musician who studied, in China from a young age and studied pipa and guzheng. And so I just would go there every week and while I was doing Avatar and take lessons with her and learn these traditional songs and just learn these how to play these instruments and just even like learning the numerical notation system was helpful because they don't use the standard Western notation. Chinese music, it's this number system with these symbols and just random the various techniques that comprise all that stuff. That was just from studying privately with this person. But I'm really glad to hear that because there was a bit of almost apprehension. I didn't want to offend anyone by presenting something traditionally incorrectly. You know what I mean, or in a way that seemed like it was making light of it or not respecting it. Not respecting the tradition. But I remember like this moment where I started to feel better about it when I went to buy a guzheng. I was my second. So the first guzheng I got was a student guzheng, and that was the one I used on Avatar. And then I decided to step it up a notch for Korra. And I went and bought this. I went to believe it or not, a guzheng store.
Oh, really?
Alhambra, I believe. Yeah, it's amazing. I couldn't believe it. They have all these guzheng. And I went in there and I called first, and the person on the phone recognized my name. And got
really?
all excited. Yeah, and she's like, my brother's, a big fan of yours, and this was traditional. I mean, you could tell like there weren't a lot of white Jewish guys coming to the store. And so it was really nice, like, because I felt like it was nice to hear that and to see that excitement. And then it occurred to me maybe even if they hear it as by no means a master, someone who's grown up listening to that music probably will hear a difference, but hopefully they see it as a way of presenting their culture in a respectful way and integrating it, and and that can be a positive thing, So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent on that, but yeah, I mean, honestly, like I don't feel like an authority of Chinese music at this point. I probably do know a lot just because I've been working with these musicians so long, like comparatively, but compared to a Chinese musician who studied since childhood, I would never want to try to hang. But it's nice to know that that I'm presenting it in a way that sounds respectful and convincing.
I mean, I think it's cool too. I mean, as much as all the fans and I do think that people could appreciate it and do think it is very authentic sounding and stuff, for those who want to delve more into that, it's a good bridge. I think it provides a good kind of opportunity for people like, oh, I really like that sound. And
exactly. Yeah, I love that. I love seeing people getting really excited. What is that instrument? It's an erhu. It's mato chin. It's really cool. As a matter of fact, one of the instruments we use in Korra a lot, mato chin, Hong, the musician, was saying he thinks it's the first time it's ever been used on a Western TV show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Possibly even in TV. I think it was in a documentary or something at some point. But yeah, it's a Mongolian instrument, and it's he's like one of the only people around that play it.
Yeah, well, that like stuff like that, things that normally just people aren't going to be exposed to, and that's
right.
Just so awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a particular place that you might be able to cite, like where that instrument is? Just do you know a particular track?
Let's see. It's used a lot actually. Trying to remember specifically. Book 2. I think a lot of the Tarlok stuff.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Unalak.
Oh,
okay.
Thematic stuff in book 2. A lot of that's like some of the melodic elements. It's sort of a lower mid-range sounding instrument, and it sort of slides between notes. It's a bowed instrument.
Oh, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, almost celloistic, but different.
Yeah, I think I remember now.
Yeah. So, and I use it a lot. I've been using it a lot in book 3. But it's usually like sort of underneath things, and it's usually also used in sort of foreboding situations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's for some reason I use it that way, but it definitely could be used beautifully, and I should definitely do that at some point.
Yeah, I can hear it now. I definitely got the picture now, which
Cool.
instrument it is. So thank you.
Sure.
Moving on, you've mentioned before that when composing music for Book 1 and 2 of The Legend of Korra, you received considerable help from fellow artists such as Hong Wang, who provided performances with much more traditional Chinese instruments. On that subject, William Felmeth asks, were there any other particular artists who inspired your work in the first and second season of Korra?
Well, for the first season, I dug into Dixieland for a while. So there was like King Oliver, and like Louis Armstrong and stuff like that. And that was fun to explore that stuff for a while, and spend some time on that. That was actually really cool because I'd never done that, and it's just like the roots of jazz, And I studied jazz at Berkeley for my undergrad, but I never studied the roots of it like that. So that was really cool. Then I think just sort of sometimes whatever I'm listening to some degree will influence me. I'll try to find a way, if I'm really inspired by it, even to find a way to make it work in the Avatar Korra world. Like there's a lot of great sort of new music happening right now. Guys like Judd Greenstein and Nico Muhly, Daniel Bjarnason, who else? Andrew Norman. I just heard a piece by him. I just discovered him in a Y Music is the ensemble, and they're doing a lot of young composers and very, very interesting, super technical, but also accessible pieces. Marcos Balter. There's all these young composers, youngish, between 30, 40, whatever. And they're just doing really cool music, and I love listening to that stuff. And I would love to have some time to write some stuff for those ensembles. So sometimes I try to like work in like a little bit. I don't even think I'm writing within that style, but it's sort of coming from inspiration from listening to that stuff. Lang, this sort of post-minimal movement. And I think you might hear that a little more in maybe a little bit in book 3.
Oh, cool. Good stuff. So we talked about this a little bit. You talked about the book 2 soundtrack and how that it revisited some themes, but there's new tracks as well. And I think we all would definitely like to see there's enough new stuff we feel to warrant a second album. So Edward Pazos from YouTube asks if there's any details or when the book 2 soundtrack will be released, if you have any information on that.
Oh man, who knows? We're trying to get that to happen. Mm-hmm. And I really want to put that out. And actually, I think I might like the music better in book 2 than book 1. In some ways, it's more traditional, like score music.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of moments that I feel are really beautiful and it worked really well, and I want people to hear it.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. It's a bit disheartening sometimes trying to get the stuff out because it would be so easy to get out. You know, but it's just.
Yeah, I remember actually you mentioned, I think it was before book 2. I'm not sure when it was, but you were saying how just a few episodes in and there was already enough material to, warrant a second album.
Yeah, that's right. That's because we did the Wand stuff, the beginnings, part 1 and first.
Oh yeah.
There's so much new material in those 2, episodes. But yeah, there's a lot of content for book 2, and it'd be awesome to get it out. And I really hope we can. But again, I really can't give you an answer because I virtually have no power, control for that. Yeah.
Well, it's cool just to know at least that it's up in the air. So there's hopefully some news coming down the line at some point.
Right.
Cool. So you touched on this a little earlier, but with book 3 around the corner, we're all wondering what sort of music and new themes will accompany the season. And considering the book is called Change, we're under the idea that we might be hearing some things a little different. So this question comes from Forlin0 via YouTube, and they ask, how will the changes to the Avatar world be reflected in the book 3 music? And is there anything you've drawn for inspiration in book 3's score?
Right. Well, I think the score in general is very cohesive. I feel like there's less ideas, but they're developed more, which I kind of enjoyed working that way. And it's got a more, I think, almost hypnotic sort of quality to it.
Cool.
Yeah, there's these sort of ideas that can go on for a long time, and the tempo stays the same, and the harmony stays the same, but the timbres are changing, things are shifting and moving. And so that was fun because that was a bit different in writing that way. And just drawing from from less material, but developing it more has been a really interesting way to work. Ways that you don't want to be redundant or repetitive, but also efficient and stick to thematic material in a way that
for sure.
Just in a way that really makes sense with what's happening. And so there's a lot of in book 3 there's this thematic element that is very prevalent, and so therefore there's a musical idea that's really prevalent.
Well, it's going to be cool to keep an ear out for and listen for kind of those shifts in the next coming book.
Cool.
Yeah. I feel like at least for book 2, you establish some new themes for some of the new characters, like Nuktuk and Unalak. But I feel like probably considering we won't be seeing either of them much, I don't know. But I mean, have you had to establish any new themes for characters coming along?
Yeah,
in book
definitely.
3?
Yeah, like that scene I'm talking about is a character theme.
Oh, okay.
And so that's a big part of it. And then finally, Bolin has a theme. It's finally emerged.
Ooh.
I think it might have first happened in book 2, but I didn't realize it was his theme. And then, that happens a lot. So it's just a little thing, but he's got a little something.
Awesome.
That's interesting.
Okay, wow. So, well, we're all super excited for book 3 then. So
cool.
Yeah. So I understand if you can't really say anything, but I'm pretty sure my readers will kill me if I don't ask you. When do you think book 3 will come out? Do you have any kind of estimate?
I'll tell you this. They haven't decided on a date yet, but we are like in good shape as far as material goes. We have plenty ready to go.
Nice.
Okay, great.
When it goes, there's going to be it'll go, and there won't be long gaps or anything like that unless the network decides to do something really weird.
Oh, well, fantastic. At least it's there, it's ready.
Definitely.
Are you done then with the book 3? Are you still
close?
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And then I think we're gonna go right into book 4.
Well, just not even much, like you were saying. I guess not too much of a break, just straight on into it.
Right. And I have no idea like how the network's gonna decide to broadcast that. As far as book 4, they're probably gonna want to wait. I have no idea. That's their field of expertise. But this stuff is happening. It's moving right along.
Ooh, exciting! And then I'm guessing, do you? I'm just curious. Do you just watch the show like when it airs? What is it? Thursday, Friday? Was it Friday last season? Do you get around with your family? Do you catch it, or do you? Is it something?
Like we usually record it, on the DVR.
Oh yeah.
I have a son and a daughter. My son's a little young, but my daughter's 4. I mean, she's still probably too young for it, but we were watching it from the beginning. And since she was like, couldn't talk, and so she watches, book 3 with me. I mean, with me, while I'm working. So she, luckily none of her friends know what she's talking about. So preschool, but yeah, and so I think like often I'm actually, when it's happening, I might be working or whatever, but often my wife and my daughter watch it together on the DVR when it's all done, or on the on the computer or whatever, on iTunes or something. But so they watch it.
That's cool. I mean, like you're saying, she maybe is kind of right at that age, kind of young, and maybe not quite.
Yeah,
just awesome to have that.
Now it's almost, some of the content's sort of mature, so sometimes I'm like, hey, I want to talk to her about it, and so nothing's freaking her out or confused about anything.
Well, that's all super awesome. And we got one more question, and this is actually not from any particular fan, just from us. And we're just kind of curious what other types of projects you're working on. We know, obviously you're in a band and you got other things going on, and what kind of stuff you're looking forward to and maybe want to kind of delve into in the future that you haven't really touched on yet.
Yeah, I'd really want to get into, I want to do some live action stuff, Scoring is so different when you're doing live action, because I feel like you can leave more room for the performances, for the human, the acting on, the human actor can carry a lot. Whereas with animation, you really need to create everything in that world. Even as well and beautifully as everything is animated, it seems to need more music, and the music needs to be a little more on the nose. Yeah. But with Korra, they've definitely, Korra is definitely one of the most subtle shows musically, stylistically. I think like the direction of music, like the way they've chosen, Brian and Mike have chosen to use music, and and I really appreciate that because I'm not really interested in like the super huge bombastic stuff.
Yeah,
I admire it, but like aesthetically, I can't emotionally I can't really relate to it too well. I'm much more interested in things that are way more subtle and like there's like a little idea that you can that like if you're really listening for it, you hear it developing slowly over time, and back in another episode and like something's happened and because of something that happened on screen. You know what I mean? Somehow it's more subtly integrated and more part of that sort of under subtext.
And it kind of has more substance when it does, as opposed to just like something that's just like you're saying, bombastic for the sake of it. It doesn't have doesn't carry that same weight and emotional relevance.
Exactly. It's not really saying anything too specific. It's just just sort of doing some surface stuff. And not everything bombastic is like that, but it's hard not to be like that when you're doing something so big. It's really hard to get into the nitty gritty of stuff when you're doing huge stuff. So I'd love to do that. I just did a thing for National Geographic. It's a PBS series called Nature.
Oh, okay, cool.
I did one of their one of the episodes on the Japanese snow monkeys in the Alps, and it's actually really beautifully shot. I'm really proud of it, and really like the way the music came out. It's going to be airing April 23rd.
Awesome. Well, we'll maybe provide, if there's a link or something, we could try to provide a link down.
Cool. Yeah. It came out really good, and I really like it. So I hope people check it out. And then I'm part of this composer collective here in LA called the Echo Society.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our first concert a couple months ago. The idea is like several of us are film or TV composers. Like there's Joe Trapanese and Nathan Johnson and Rob Simonson and Ben Wynn and a couple, Eskimo, the electronic music musician, Judson Crane. So there's a few of us, and the idea is that we're making music for just because we want to make it. You know what I mean? We're not doing it for anything else. We're not. So we basically do whatever we can do whatever we want. The aesthetic choices are ours alone. And it's really so different than the way most of us are used to working, and it's a great feeling. At first, it's super horrifying. But it's a great feeling. So we're doing that. We had a really great first concert. We're using awesome musicians. We basically just funding it ourselves. Actually, we did get some sponsors, which was awesome. So we paid some of it ourselves. Some of it the sponsors covered. And we're just gonna keep trying to do, like, right now I think we're doing it twice a year, and then we're gonna try to do it maybe 3 or 4 times a year eventually. And it's a great outlet for us, so there's that. And wow, that was my bone cracking. I don't know if that came out.
Nothing broken, I hope.
All right, no, I think I'm all right. So there's always something going on, there's aspirations and stuff, but the TV stuff definitely can keep you busy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and then you and Ben, right? You've been doing a couple scores for a couple of features, right? I mean, I saw A Leading Man, I know, was screening recently.
That's right. Screening. Actually, it's coming up. It's screening in LA. It's screened somewhere else. It's screening in LA though for the first time, May 2nd.
Okay.
And you can get a ticket somewhere. Maybe you guys can. I can try to find you a link for that or something.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely.
That'd be cool. We'll post that.
Yeah, and again, that score Ben and I were really proud of. We really liked the way that score came out. It was much different than stuff we've been, we usually write, and it was a cool collaboration between the two of us. Like our ideas sort of melded in an interesting way that we haven't really done before. It's a very piano-driven score, but there's a real like electronic element as well, and it's very subtle. But interesting. Like there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of details in the score that are sort of subtle but there. So the soundtrack's available for that actually too on iTunes.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So
you definitely seem to be staying super busy. I mean, obviously book 3 coming out pretty soon, and then Echo Society and a couple of feature film screenings. So man, some awesome stuff.
And book 4, of course, which is
and book 4 shortly after that. So.
Yep. That's right. Yeah. I try. And then I have the family, and I not ignore that.
It must be nice to work from home, though, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's got its pros and cons. It's great because I would never see them otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But the con is that sometimes, like my daughter might sort of come in and be pounding on the door and wanting to watch Korra or something. I think she thinks, well, she's figuring it out finally, but I think she used to think that my job was just to sit and watch Korra over and over again for 10, 12 hours a day. But so, and then it's sometimes hard to step away, because it's it's right there. So turn it off. But I think the pros outweigh the cons for sure.
And I think that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for listening to our first episode of KorraScope. These sorts of projects are quite easily conceived, but they're not always the easiest to get off the ground. So we have you all, and Jeremy, of course, to thank for that. This episode is available on SoundCloud, YouTube, and I believe will be available on iTunes sometime in the next week, but don't quote me on that. And, of course, you can find all the links you need below. Okay, so Keval, why don't you close this out by telling us what's next for KorraScope?
We have a number of guests that we plan on interviewing in the near future, one of which is Janet Varney, the voice of Korra, who we plan on interviewing as long as Nickelodeon approves. We'll be posting updates on our various sites and social media outlets, so definitely keep an eye out for that. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you tune in next time.